Angie and Tim focused on this time in the study committee really was, okay, now we know where we need to be, but who's paying for what? And how do we make sure the people who are actually utilizing the service are paying for that service that they're utilizing?
And to your point earlier, instead of it being a big jolt in one specific year, it's taking gradually over a number of years to smooth out. Isn't that what we're talking about?
Probably stealing Angie's thunder.
Well, I mean, just to be candid about, that's what we're trying to achieve for everybody.
Exactly.
So it's fair for everybody, and it's not a big bite for anyone.
Exactly.
Okay.
So I think some really good points that were made in terms of if we look at the sanitation fund in total, this would not be revealed in terms of, what each particular collection versus solid waste processing facility looks like. In total, we're fine, we have fund balance, et cetera. It really reveals itself when you start kind of peeling off and kind of peeling the skinner off and saying, really, what should those particular fees be for collection versus the solid waste processing facility?
Okay.
So really, in a nutshell, here's kind of what we're looking at here is this particular table has a number of things that it's representing. So the rate study proposal is in the orange, and so back when the study was completed, it actually went from 2013 through 2020, but we wanted to kind of stop in terms of where we are today. The rates for the tipping fees were the $73.80, and with the 3% increases over time, really where we needed to be today in 2017 was more like $83.05. That was the projection. The gray, the gray represents really what has been occurring. And so you can see there, 2013 we recalibrated, and then as we went out over time, again, due to those CPI adjustments, we started to lose a bit of ground in terms of what the proposal had anticipated the level of our tipping fees. Now you're going to see this cost of service line up here. When we completed that very comprehensive study in 2011, 2012, kind of the business as usual had stated that the cost of service was $85.83 in order to complete, where that tipping fee should be. Because of the various decisions that were made, so elimination of free tonnage, instituting of the $10 fee, we were able to lower the fee from, really what would have been the $85.83 if we would have stayed kind of what we were doing to the $73.80. So that's where the recalibration happened, and then we were going to do 3% per year.
Well, and the good news about that $10 fee that you just mentioned a moment ago, if you have somebody that's taking, for their own household stuff and has got additional things, it's a $10 fee. It's not burning everybody else that doesn't do that, which I think is fair. I've used that myself a number of different times, and I think that's a very fair way of doing it.
Mm-hmm. So, Angie, what's our current cost of service?
So where you need to be right now is more at the $83.05. So we're a little bit short in terms of that particular tipping fee, which is based on the alternatives you'll see. That's kind of really what we're trying to say is we need to catch up at some particular time, but there are some alternatives in terms of catching up. So now we'll switch over to the 2016 update. And so again, really what this update was intended to do is say, here was this plan that we had out there. We're about halfway through that particular plan. How are we doing? Can we stay with the plan, or might we need to make some changes? And so when we look at the collection utility, some of the key factors there was we did update the budget to make sure that we were aligning with existing current revenues and expenses. Our growth rate has assumed basically flat, so no growth rate in terms of some of the collection account growth, et cetera. We also do have a fairly large capital project there in terms of the recycling center over a multiple period, but again, it's about $4.5 million. It does include land purchase, remediation, and construction, and a good part of it is that there's about $450,000 revenue offset from the property sale, so there is an assumption that there will be some assistance to reduce that cost from property sale.
Hang on a second. Commissioner McGraw had his hand up. Dave, you want to come up here and talk at the podium?
Quick question, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much. Angie, that you say growth rate flat, is that?
Commissioner, I'm sorry, but we are recording this, so if you could go to the podium.
Just your name and your address and just who in the world you are, even though we all know
you
you.
need no introduction.
Yep, I've been here before.
We have your social security number.
Bank number, no. Dave McGraw, Latah County Commissioners, Troy, 102 East A. Angie, excuse me, but when you say growth rate, is that tons that we're dumping or population? What do you mean by growth rate?
On this is the collection side. So we're strictly looking at collection now. We're going to look at the solid waste processing facility next, and that'll have its own in terms of tonnage and particular waste types.
So this is population?
Yeah, this is collection.
I just wanted to be clear. Thank you. Thanks.
Yep.
So the other thing that when we're looking at the collection system, we want to make sure that we have particular fiscal policies in mind, and so we do want to see about maintaining a 90-day operating fund target balance. Again, kind of some of the ebbs and flows of our cash flow. We just want to make sure that we have sufficient funds.
By the way, that is council policy. Council adopted the 3-month, 90-day reserve policy just for what Angie said. So if we have revenues that are waning for some reason, we can still meet our obligation.
That was Resolution 2011-11.
Good memory.
That is a good memory. So just for comparison purposes, again, we kind of showed really how those particular costs were split out between those various different cost pools as we had in the 2012 study. Very similar in terms of how we break out currently. And then when we bring everything together, again, these are your expenses. You can kind of see what those major categories look like. And so when we look at, okay, what are our expenses and what are our collection revenues? So the existing revenue is in the solid line. The proposed revenue is in the dotted line here. And so if we maintained our existing proposal with 3% per year, essentially what we are basically saying is that we believe the original rate plan for collection can be maintained. So there's no changes beyond what the 2012 study said that need to be made for collection. We can kind of maintain the course, stay the course, and we should be fine. The good news is it actually looks like we'd actually gone out for 2020 for another 3%, but it looks like we may not need that at this particular time for collection. So we may actually be able to shorten the rate adjustments by 1 year. Something to monitor and keep track of. Tim does a good job of in terms of looking at the plan compared to the budget, and so we will keep an eye on that. But it's possible that we don't need that last year rate increase that we had anticipated in the original study. Okay. In terms of the solid waste processing facility, and so some of the key things here, as we talked about, or again, we updated to the budget. Now, general cost inflation and the CPI is really come into play in terms of these particular contracts. So we did just want to highlight what those particular CPI indices are and the general cost inflation. Here is the kind of the tonnage or the growth rate for the solid waste processing facility. So actually in 2017 and 18, we're looking at a 1% reduction for the tipping fee and a minimum fee, assuming again that the increase in recycling participation and other diversion could possibly, kind of tick us down a little bit, and then basically we're going to be flat. So, there's different objectives that are happening in terms of solid waste and sanitation management, and so we just wanted to account for the fact that, we actually may be seeing a reduction in the type of revenues that are coming in for that particular facility.
If I may, Mayor?
Gary? All right, Walter?
Your solid waste processing facility does not include recycling,
It does not, I don't believe that's
correct? Okay.
No, recycling's allocated in collection.
Okay. So you've only seen a 1% reduction in tonnage at the solid waste facility with all of the recycling we're doing?
We based the rate study on a 1% reduction, not knowing what that number was going to be. We took a conservative approach to it.
So the 1% tonnage reduction is an assumption, not a
Correct.
reality.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
Again, breaking out some of the cost pools, you can see that the appliances, the tires, and the asbestos used to be broken out in the 2012 study is actually now combined into miscellaneous other for the contracts. That's why it's not broken out here and shows a little bit only 2 cost pools. And so when we look at the solid waste processing facility annual revenue requirement, a bit different from the collection, you can see that here's where we are in terms of our existing revenue. Here are our overall expenses. In this particular case, we were looking at, what is basically the indice that we have to comply with in terms of our adjustments for 2017, and you can see it's a 0.12%. And then we said, what do we need to do over time in order to get us where we need to go without really causing a large initial impact to our users of that particular facility? If we needed to do an immediate recalibration, it'd be about 12.5% pretty quickly, that we would need to implement. But we said, well, what are some options that we have here? So the first option we looked at was that we'd have a 6.5% increase beginning in fiscal year 2018. It would have to go for 3 years, followed by 2% increases, and then again for this time period that we extended out this time, 0%. But you can see, Until about 2020, we're not really catching up with our expenses with this particular rate plan. And so what it would require is that we would have to use about $337,000 in reserves in order to help phase that in over time. Okay, so again, we're not recalibrating immediately to get up to here, and so this phase-in will cost a bit of our reserves. Okay.
Now, understand that those reserves were generated in the collection side of the sanitation operation,
Absolutely.
since we're actually losing money in the solid waste processing facility end of the operation.